The question that everyone's not asking now is which stock to buy. I think everyone's asking, should I exit completely?
Is this a very cheap down and out market? Answer is no. Is this a bubble kind of market? Answer is no. We were 100% in cash for the last 18 months or 20 months. You would have done better than the headline index. Under penetration is a constant story in India. Now one could invest in solar companies, one could invest in wind companies, one could invest in power generating companies. Everyone should aspirationally move to something like a 25% global allocation. 10 people are trading. The aggregate wins and losses will be zero. So net it's a negative sum game.
You've stayed largely silent when it comes to Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. Is it skepticism on that front?
Will Bitcoin replace fiat currency for day-to-day transactions? It's a solution in search of a problem. So in January, people collectively poured in 35,000 crores of rupees into gold and silver ETFs.
Talking about AI that's rapidly commoditizing financial analysis.
The cycles of greed and fear, the cycle of boom bust has not gone away. If some sector becomes too competitive, the margins.
Welcome to Wealth by Motilal Oswal. I'm Avan Dabash. My guest for today is Rajiv Thakkar, Chief Investment Officer at PPFAS Mutual Fund and one of the key architects behind the Parag Parikh Flexi Cap Fund, now India's largest actively managed equity scheme with assets of over 1 lakh crore rupees. Under his leadership, PPFAS has built a reputation that is quite rare in the mutual fund industry. Consistent long term performance, a distinct investment philosophy, and a willingness to sit out the noise when it doesn't add value. In this conversation, we go beyond the usual talking points and into the questions that don't often get asked. Where are the markets really standing once you strip away the headlines? Which sectors still deserve capital and which ones are becoming crowded? How should investors think about geopolitics in a portfolio that is meant to last decades and not quarters? We go deeper into the personal side of investing, his relationship with money, how he thinks about risk beyond the markets, and how he approaches investing for his own family. There are few people better placed to have this conversation than someone who spent over 2 decades not just observing markets, but managing through them. And importantly, investing his own money alongside investors. Rajiv, thank you so much for joining us today. I think at a time when we are looking at Donald Trump's tweets, we're looking at headlines changing by the minute, and we're looking at this huge flow of news that's coming in. The question that everyone's not asking now is which stock to buy. I think everyone's asking, should I exit completely? So there is that sense of nervousness in the market. But you're firmly of the view that you should not monitor the headlines on a day to day basis. The market is a game for at least 5 years. Explain that theory.
So people who choose commerce instead of science or arts would appreciate this. In the first year of commerce college, we are taught this subject, which is called Organization of Commerce.
Oh my God, I
which says
remember OC.
OC,
Yeah.
which says that when you buy equities, you are buying an ownership in a business. So that's the first principle basis. Stock ownership is not some entry that comes in your demat account or where there's a second by second quotation which appears on the financial app or on the ticker on screen. Of course, it is all those things, but those are the peripheral things. Even shares of a private limited company are there which are not quoted on the exchanges, but which gives you voting rights, which gives you business ownership interest. So if you go by first principles, then you can ignore these events and noises. So let us say someone is too concerned about the things that you mentioned, the war between Iran and Israel and US, whether the Strait of Hormuz is open or not open. Now, if you actually go down the list of companies, there would be so many companies which are completely unaffected by this. Let us say utilities, a power company or a telecom company is not going to have any material impact. The people will still consume electricity, or people will still pay their cell phone bills, or REIT will still collect rental income from its tenants. But even those things will go up and down 5%, 10% based on headlines,
Yeah, the sentiment.
based on the sentiment. So if someone actually tunes out, all these things come and go. So I don't think any viewer would be expecting the war to last 1 or 2 years, right? People are saying, will it last 1 more month, six
Fingers
months?
crossed.
Fingers crossed. But if someone comes to the equity market with a 5 year horizon, they can simply tune out all these things.
Okay, so simply tune out the noise. These are headlines that will keep changing. The life of or the trajectory of your stocks isn't really going to be altered for the most part. So given that you have that view, what's the outlook when it comes to how one should look at an entry level at this point? Is this an aggressive buying opportunity? Are you saying when there's a consolidation phase, maybe you also remain on the sidelines? What's the approach that you are adopting?
So, firstly, a large part of investors, whether they are salaried employees or whether they are small business owners, they have regular cash flows coming in, which they save for longer term needs, either asset purchase like a home or a vehicle or retirement or some milestone events in their family, children's education or their wedding, and so on and so forth. Now, someone saving on a monthly basis, that person can simply again ignore what the current valuation is. They will buy low, they will buy high, they will buy moderate, and over a period of time, as India grows, as the economy grows, corporate earnings grow, stock prices will grow. They need not worry about their existing running SIPs or STPs that are there. If someone comes into a windfall, let's say someone gets a retirement corpus today or someone wins the lottery, uh, is this a very cheap down and out market? Answer is no. Is this a bubble kind of market? Answer is no. It's somewhere in the fair value territory. The good part is we have consolidated for about 2 years now, where the index has gone nowhere, and the corporate earnings obviously have grown to some extent in this 2 year period. Uh, in some pockets where there were excesses, prices have also moderated. So there has been some price correction in some pockets. Valuations are reasonable. This is at the average level. If you dig below the surface, there will be segments which are still looking expensive. These are specifically things to do with the newer listings or uh, things to do with retail consumption. Those are still somewhat in the expensive territory. But if you look at things like private sector banks, etc., or some select utilities, those are looking fairly reasonable now.
Okay. So you've been fairly cautious on valuations right now. You said they are looking reasonable, but what is that actual trigger that you will say, now I will deploy my cash aggressively? What is that specific, maybe P or earnings yield that will really flip the switch for you?
So we are not buying the index. We are not passive funds. We are an active fund. So that movement has come in a lot of stocks for us where we are buyers. In some cases, uh, given the volatility, we are getting some fills and then there are rebounds in the prices. But we have been generally buyers in the month of March and April so far. So we have been on the buy side.
Okay. But this concept of yours that really garners a lot of headlines is this holding cash. And it was one of the questions I asked you previously also. You're describing holding cash as playing test cricket, but this is at a time when a lot of your peers like DSP or Amire, for example, are fully invested. So what is your rationale?
This is a backward looking answer. We can talk about forward looking as well. If let us say we were 100% in cash for the last 18 months or 20 months, we would have done better than the headline index, right? We would have got 6.5% in money market, whereas index has done nothing. So cash has not harmed us or the end investor.
Okay.
So why worry about it? That is one part. Second, as I said, we are deploying. We have bought in the month of March. We have been buying in the month of April. As and when the opportunity arises, we have been deploying. Uh, so sometimes we have deployed as much as 10% of the portfolio in a single month. So it is not that we are not deploying. We have done uh, single ticket deals of 2000 plus crores in the secondary market. We have done uh, another block deal of 800, 900 crores. We have done a QIP of 700 crores. We are buyers. Uh, so it's not that we are in a hurry to run now, but whenever the opportunity arises, we don't shy away from deploying as well.
Okay, and like you said, sitting on the cash has not done you any harm so far. I want to understand the flexi cap in overseas stocks. That's about 10 to 11% of the flexi cap in overseas stocks. There are lots of global names: Alphabet, Meta, Amazon. Given what's happening with the dollar currently, given what we're looking at with the US markets as well, would you be increasing that allocation? And what's your advice to people who are still on the sidelines about global allocation?
So we cannot increase the allocation because for 2.5, 3 years now, 3 years, the limit for mutual funds to invest abroad that has been exhausted. Uh, we can shuffle the stocks that we have, but we cannot remit dollars outside of India. So what used to be close to 30% allocation to foreign stocks, that has over time come down to around 10 and a half, 11 that you spoke about. These companies, the four companies that we own, look reasonably attractive. So they are in the cloud computing space, AI, in the digital advertising, e-commerce. So they are on the right side of the broader trends. Valuations are reasonable. So they are not solely dependent on AI future and no current cash flows. So these have current profits, current cash flows that are there. So we are pretty comfortable with our ownership here. End investors, if they want meaningful global diversification, increasingly they will have to do it themselves using the LRS route. They can either buy stocks directly by opening brokerage accounts, buy foreign mutual funds, or buy gift city domiciled funds.
Okay. So, how much are you advising typically as part of one's portfolio to have global allocation?
Most people have close to zero
Hmm.
global allocation. Uh, a data point for people to ponder about: Indian market cap in terms of global market
Yeah.
cap is only about 4% uh, as a percentage of global market cap. So, a lot of large companies are outside of India. So, to begin with, I think everyone should aspirationally move to something like a 25% global allocation from close to zero that most people have.
So let's delve into the outlook when it comes to the private financials, because that is something that you've looked at. But even the bluest of the blue chips within this space have underperformed. So what is your rationale now? Do you just stay the course? Do you buy on the declines?
So, in the market, different sectors come in and go out of favor, uh, sometimes for very flimsy reasons. Uh, the valuations of public sector banks were very depressed and they had a big rebound. And I think a few private sector banks went through this management transition. So, in HDFC Bank, there was a new leadership. In ICICI Bank, there was a leadership change. In Kotak Bank, there was a leadership change. Axis Bank as well. So the
Yeah,
top four
pretty
private
much
sector
all.
banks had a leadership change. One of the banks went through a big merger. HDFC Bank and HDFC
HSCD.
Limited merged. So given this environment, there have been certain transitional challenges in the private sector banking space, but broadly things are on track. They still are preferred by end customers, as is seen by their market share gains overall in the deposit uh, base, etc. Of course, SBI has got its act together, and a few large public sector banks are also now competitive. Uh, but I don't see a big challenge overall. Their asset quality, etc., is uh, quite good. They've been ceding market share wherever the lending environment is too competitive. So mortgage or vehicle finance, where spreads have come down significantly, they have consciously pulled back, saying at these spreads it does not make sense to try and increase share.
Which are the other sectors within which, in the current market, like you said, it keeps changing the preference, but where we're at right now, that you're finding the maximum favor, the top three spaces?
So private sector bank is one space. Uh, Consensus is against IT services. So as we speak, one of the companies is seeing a sell off today, and overall the IT space is down. Near term, of course, there is this uh, pushback of order flow. People are still trying to figure out how much can we negotiate the rates down given the increased productivity around AI, etc. There will be still requirement for people to implement. If one takes a very pessimistic view, then not just IT services, there will not be something like a big four as well. Maybe people will just one chartered accountant will upload all the company data on a AI tool and say, just
Yeah.
audit this for me and tell me what are the red flags and prepare the audit report for me. Or the entire litigation will be done by two AI models against each other. So I'm not in that extreme camp. So
Okay.
IT services is the other
IT
space
services.
where
Hmm.
we are uh,
Hmm.
looking for opportunities. Auto has seen a rebound given the GST cuts, given the whole shift towards new powertrains, newer model refreshes. So there is, and under penetration is a constant story in India where there's a long runway. So these three spaces are looking reasonably okay.
Okay, private banks, IT services, and also looking at auto. What about your outlook on energy transition as a theme? How would you advise people to play that, given the kind of volatility as well that we've seen here?
So the theme is very real. Uh, we will, if we are to get richer, if we are to improve our standards of living for the population as a whole, we will require more energy, and we will need to shift away from the fossil fuels. So these are the two large trends that are there. Uh, Increased computing requires increased power usage. So whether it's normal data centers or AI driven compute that is there, as transportation moves away from petrol, diesel towards electric vehicles, that requires additional electricity. So plenty of opportunities. Now one could uh, invest in solar companies, one could invest in wind companies, one could invest in power generating companies, and not just equipment providers, transmission lines, transformers, energy exchange. There are various opportunities. The challenge is to limit yourself to companies with pricing power and decent balance sheet. So what has happened is, if in the past is, if some sector becomes too competitive, the margins compress, and the if someone is excessively leveraged in that space, then there could be solvency issues.
Are you just sort of hitting your head when it comes to any sector saying, I really missed the bus, I really regret not getting it, now valuations have soared crazily, or now it's not at the right price in the current market environment, honestly?
So there are always misses.
But right now, what's the biggest miss?
I think so. In the defense space, for example, some of the, not every company again,
Yeah, but by
some
and
of
large.
the tier one PSU businesses which have a diversified base in terms of order flow, etc., and not dependent on a particular uh, technology or a particular business line. So those were very cheap about 5 years back.
And you missed that.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's a bit of a regret right now. So, what are you telling people, those
So
who have missed the
that time,
bus?
at that time, there would be something else we would be buying. So
Fair. Okay. So,
yeah, I
no,
think it's part of the game. I don't
yeah.
worry too much about
Okay.
things that happened
I
did
think
not
it's
happen.
this calm demeanor that you have and that you need to have when you're dealing with this, and we were chatting about this off cam that emotions as well play a big role, your EQ, when it comes to investing. And there are so many moving parts today, and there are a lot of investors who are serious about their SIP investment, but then a lot that are getting their fingers burnt and going about this trading. What's the message that you want to give them?
There's no moral argument against trading. It is not that I'm preaching that it's uh, bad or something like that. All I'm saying is if 10 people are trading, the aggregate wins and losses will be zero before costs. So instead of trading, think about it as a playing card game. If 10 people are on a table gambling, when you add all the wins and losses, it's zero. In trading, after zero, there are STT costs to be paid, there's brokerage to be paid, and people who win have to pay taxes. The people who lose money don't get any check from the finance ministry. So net net is it's a negative sum game. Aggregate, people will lose money. If instead of playing a card game, if 10 people came together and started a business, and if that business did well, all 10 of them can win. So investing is a game where over a period of time everybody wins. If uh, Sensex uh, goes from 100 to 80,000, everyone who's bought into corporate India has won
Yeah.
along the way.
Okay, but trading is a zero sum game. You're being quite categorical about that. I think investors also tend to do one thing. They tend to look in the rear view mirror and they're chasing those returns that have already ballooned. Is that a big mistake? Any other common mistakes?
So, whatever has happened in the rear view mirror, if you have a long time horizon, you can replicate it by a diversified equity investing kind of thing. But chasing the theme or asset class which has done well over the last 6 months or 1 year and blindly rushing into it is not a great idea. So in January, people collectively poured in 35,000 crores of rupees into gold and silver ETFs. This is after those assets had run up significantly. So those kind of things usually do not end well.
I want to just talk about certain things that maybe you haven't addressed or spoken about too often. You run, of course, a human judgment led fund, but we're talking about AI that's rapidly commoditizing financial analysis. Are you looking at it as a tool, as a threat, or as both?
It's a tool. Uh, if it was a threat and if it was making everything machine like, then
We
you
wouldn't be
wouldn't see
sitting here.
these
Yeah.
wild swings, right? How is it that uh, stocks move up and down 10, 15, 20% within a matter of weeks or months? Obviously, one of the two is incorrect. One of the two prices is incorrect. So the human emotions haven't gone away. The cycles of greed and fear, the cycle of boom bust has not gone away.
Okay. You've stayed largely silent when it comes to Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. Is it skepticism on that front, or is it not in your circle of competence? Are you dead against it? Where do you stand?
Anything that public at large agree upon, saying that this is something valuable, uh, has some value in exchange. So, if two people agree that this painting is one of its kind and should command a price of, let's say, 2 lakh of rupees, then you can sell that painting for 2 lakh of rupees. But inherently, such things don't have cash flow. So whether it's gold, whether it's silver, whether it's rare paintings, sculptures, Bitcoin, these are things with zero inherent cash flow. Uh, they largely depend on demand and supply. So we have no way of assessing whether the market price is correct or incorrect. And we largely stay away from opining on these things. Now, if you ask me the whether Nifty is fairly valued or not. So you ask me this question, where do you stand on
Yeah.
equity market
Yeah.
valuation? So I can give you my judgment on equity market valuation, or we can argue whether 10-year government security yield of 6.9 is a fair yield or not. But who knows what the correct price of Bitcoin is? Will Bitcoin replace fiat currency for day to day transactions? I'm very skeptical. It's a solution in search of a problem, because UPI and credit cards work just fine for transacting. As a store of value, does it have a use? I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. It's outside your circle of competence, and you're skeptical on crypto in general. You touched upon something earlier when we were talking about valuations going out of whack. You said a lot of these new age tech companies. So where do you stand? Do you believe that the valuations are completely unjustified? Profitability is not being looked at as a metric? Are investors just jumping the gun? What's the view?
The end use case is real. So I am a consumer of most of these
Yeah.
things. So, for example, when there's no house help, one logs
Yeah.
into a app,
Yeah.
someone comes home
Yeah.
to do the dishes. If I want to go from point A to point B, I hail a cab on a ride hailing app. I've ordered for food delivery. I've ordered on quick commerce. So all of these are real businesses with real top line and a large user base. These are in the cash burn stage right now, and plenty of people are competing.
Yeah.
So ultimately, which are the companies that will be winners in this space is difficult to predict right now. And what valuation can one give to these companies is also a challenge. Uh, you have two listed food ordering quick commerce companies. A third IPO is on the way. Two global retail giants are entering the space. A few big corporate backed private companies are in the space. Some of the traditional brick and mortar large retailers are reducing their delivery times and are entering. So I don't know what the end game here is. Maybe one or two companies will do exceedingly well, but as a whole, chances are people may end up losing money.
In the space.
Yeah, if you enter at the current valuation.
No, but maybe those who did when the IPO pop happened.
So these days, what happens is these companies don't IPO at the beginning.
Yeah.
The private equity players have funded them. They are already at a substantial market cap when they actually come for list.
Correct. Okay. Um, any other sectors that you say, I'm not going to touch this with a barge pole?
FMCG companies, for example, some of the companies are seeing some revival in top line, bottom line growth, but still the
Valuations?
valuations are quite expensive. So anything to do with Indian consumption, valuations are a hurdle there.
But you don't think that like the rural theme is picking up? We're seeing this sense of premiumization. I mean, you were talking yourself about using quick commerce and this sort of spending that we're seeing, especially in the upper middle class. Not convinced?
Even accounting for all of that, you cannot have a scenario where you have 10-15% kind of earnings growth and you pay 80-90 times earnings.
So it's just not justified according to you right now. If it came to reasonable valuations, you would consider looking
Yes,
at
but we
consumption.
are, in most cases, we are far away from the reasonable valuations.
Absolutely. But do you think that equity ownership still in India is concentrated to the top 1-2%? Will equity markets ultimately help democratize wealth creation, or are they just going to widen this inequality?
So the nature of capitalism is that it's largely unequal, but still it's better than other systems, because uh, even the relatively uh, poorer people are better off than other economic systems like communism, etc. The good part is that increasingly vehicles like EPFO, vehicles like NPS are now participating in equity markets. Even the concept of ESOPs for a large segment of employees Those are making it more democratic, where more people can participate. Number of unique investors in mutual funds, number of unique demat holders, that is increasing. So more and more people are coming in the fold. I am hopeful that things will be better down the road.
Okay. I want to ask you some questions that maybe are a little bit of a closing reflection or a little bit personal, because you've gone ahead and built this 1.3 lakh crore fund empire on Parag Parikh's legacy, but it was his untimely passing in the year 2015. I'm sure that must have shifted your perspective on life, your purpose, wealth creation. How did it impact you?
So obviously it was a big jolt, the founder not being there and in a very sudden kind of unplanned uh, transition. So it was a big jolt. The good part was that the core team was already there. So the uh, new CEO after him, Neil Parag Parekh, he was already part of the organization. It was not that he had to uh, come from somewhere else and then figure out what was happening. So the core team was constant, and the goodwill that Parag Bhai had created, that helped us uh, hold fort and continue to build on his legacy. Uh, the discontinuity was that we were even more enthused to uh, uphold the principles and continue things the way they were, and keep the clients' interests at the core of whatever we do.
Absolutely, upholding that, strong sense of reputation, and that was held. What about your relationship with money? Are you more on the frugal side? Do you spend fairly easily? What is your relationship like with money?
I'm quite frugal, so
Okay.
yeah, beyond a point,
Give,
money is not something that I obsess over, either
okay.
for accumulating or for spending.
And is that something that you hope to inculcate as a practice even for, future generations?
Uh, I think it's things that happen at a point in time. So the people born today will be born in a era of more affluence than, let's say, 50 years back. So they will have most likely a different approach to money. But let's say in my growing up years, even if you had a ton of money, you could buy either of two cars, a Premier Padmini or Ambassador. So
How things have changed.
yeah.
Okay. You've spoken about avoiding envy and not tying a lot of identity to possessions. But like you said, in today's world where possessions and the want and this hedonic treadmill plays such a big role, what is the advice that you want to give?
So I have nothing against people wanting nice things in life, but beyond a point, uh, it doesn't change things very materially. So the lives that even a middle class person would be living today would be better than the kings 200 years back. So they have access to air conditioned rooms, cars, which were not invented, air travel, which were not invented way back. And let us say whether you have a Maruti car or whether you have a Rolls Royce, ultimately you will be stuck in the same traffic jam. So beyond a point, it doesn't change things too much.
It's so nice that you have this, these very strong values that you uphold. And you speak a lot about personal finance, but I'm curious, what do dinner table conversations at home look like? Does your family invest the same way you do? Are there lots of debates and conversations?
So my wife is in the same field. So uh, and I have a daughter. She's also pretty financially aware. But dinner table conversations typically are around movies or
Keeping it light.
yeah, travel and things like that.
Okay. So
Not so much
no
around finance.
we agree to disagree, and no not clashing of opinions when it comes to personal finance.
No.
Okay, great. Okay, if there's today say a 30-year-old who comes to you and says, I have 5 lakh of rupees. I've never invested in the equity markets. Give me the best advice. I want bang for my buck. I have a fairly decent risk profile. What is going to be your portfolio? What's it going to look like?
So if this person is 30-year-old and has never invested in equity, I'm presuming the person has other assets
Yeah.
which would be either fixed income or real estate kind
Let's
of.
assume it's fixed income.
I think entire money can go to equity as long as
How?
someone through mutual funds.
Which ones?
So if the person does not have any uh, prior background or does not have the time and inclination to monitor things, then that person can buy a Nifty 50 index fund or a large cap fund from someone. Uh, or the if the person is reasonably savvy or maybe can review the portfolio once in 6 months or something,
Yeah, assume it's a
then the person can choose diversified funds. So flexi cap funds, value funds, or a mix of large and mid cap, small cap funds. Some combination of well run funds with a track record and a good management team.
and they can expect what kind of return in the next 5 years? Approx.
Yeah. So I would think, uh, given India's real GDP growth rate, given the inflation, nominal, we should do around 11-12% at the equity level. So as an asset class, I think 12% should be something that people can more or less expect in the Indian context, nominal.
I haven't actually asked you your opinion on what the India story is right now, given the kind of global headlines, our own macros. What's our biggest challenge? What's the biggest opportunity?
The biggest opportunity is we are a relatively young country in a aging world. Uh, the problems of the past where we were too dependent on imports, especially energy, or the low forex reserves that we had, or the large amount of red tape that was there. A lot of those are behind us. So, broadly, things are fine with us unless we get into some big armed conflict with someone, or unless there is absolute chaos on the political side, some hung parliament and some weird legislation gets passed. I think broadly we are on track.
Let's get to a quick rapid fire before we let you go.
Sure.
Okay. Do you check the markets and the news and the headline? No, wait. Do you check your portfolio every single morning? Yes or no?
Given the profession I am in, I'm forced to, so I don't have a choice.
One investing book that you would recommend for someone who's maybe just starting out, or maybe something that had a huge impact on you?
So, someone who's starting out, I think a very accessible book is One Up on Wall Street. So, doesn't have too much jargon and more of a story kind of thing.
The top theme for the next 5 years, sector wise, in India is?
I think diversified funds don't stick to one sector.
Okay. And do you have any guru or market gurus that you look up to?
So, quite a few. So, in terms of behavioral finance, etc., keeping your own behavior under check, our founder had a big role to play. In terms of the framework for equity investing, people like Buffett, Munger in India, Professor Sanjay Bakshi, Mr. Chandrakant Sampath, plenty of people.
Okay. What a pleasure it's been interacting with you. Thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
It's really been enlightening in this conversation. And here are some of the key takeaways of this interview. Ignore all the noise, ignore the events. The equity markets are for at least a 5 year perspective. So keep a long term time horizon in mind. Sitting on cash has not harmed them at all. But when the opportunity is right, the approach is to invest. Private banks, IT services, and auto are the top 3 sectors that they're looking at. Energy transition is also a huge theme. When you're trading, remember it's a negative sum game. Don't blindly chase a theme or go into a theme because it's very popular. Do remember that crypto, as well as an asset class, there's no way of really assessing it. And India has a long term story. The demographic dividend is clearly working for us. So the long term story does look strong. I hope you enjoyed watching this interview. Do remember to like, share, and comment at the bottom of this video. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Investment in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.